Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucks in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
You got to change that intro. I haven't been on this show in a while. Why am I introducing myself? I'm not even a member of this show. Like, I haven't been on this show in over a month and a half, 2 months now, right?
Yeah, maybe the fans just like, or the listeners of this show just like hearing your voice, Chris, and maybe I just like hearing it.
I think that's what it is. We need to redo that. I mean, come on. Like, I can't believe you're still using that. That's amazing.
I'm lazy in some ways, dude. The
I'm
intro
telling people,
is,
come on, let's listen to Chris, and Chris isn't even on the show.
yeah. It happens, man. It happens.
I love it. I love it. You know, I think today will be kind of fun. It's what, 5-year anniversary of Bucks in the Basement. That's
Absolutely,
why I'm back.
yeah.
I'm back because I was here for most of the show, and then I made a quiet exit. And I think most people that listened or watched this show, depending on how you like to consume your podcast, I think most people, if they ever went and looked at who I was and what I was doing, or looked up what the broadcast basement was or anything like that, would see that I'm running a podcast network where every show on the network, with the exception of maybe Bucks in the Basement and one that was out in California, every other show is based out of Chicago. If you're paying attention behind me, Hailstorm Brewing, you can look that up. That's Chicago brewery. There's White Sox stuff behind me, right? Like,
Listen to your voice, man.
Yeah.
It's not a Pittsburgh accent.
Right. I don't have a Pittsburgh accent. Like, I know some of the terminology because I lived out there for a couple of years. My ex-wife was born in Wheeling and grew up in Mingo Junction, Ohio, outside of Steubenville. I did radio at 100.5 WAMP FM, which I think now is just an internet radio station. I don't know what they are right now. I was the only morning guy besides Johnny O out there, like over a 30-year period. There's this guy, Johnny O, that was always the morning guy. He left. Cindy Taylor and somebody else took over while they did a search. They found me coming out and looking for my second job after going number one in Champaign, Illinois. And they hired me, and I was there for 2 years, including 9/11. I left 3 weeks after 9/11 to take a job in Reno, Nevada. And they hired Johnny O back because people were familiar with him, and that was a time whenever all research said people just want the most familiar person. That's who they're listening to, because 9/11 had just happened. And so he had left to move to another station. He came back. He's still with them now. And I'm like, a trivia question: who's the only morning guy other than Johnny O at 100.5 WAMP FM in Wheeling, West Virginia, which also broadcasts into Pittsburgh? Like, you can still find it on the dial. It shows up on their ratings books. I know in Washington, PA, a lot of people listen to it, even though it was, so we're like a suburban radio station for Pittsburgh. And I was out there in the early 2000s, and I have always adopted the Pirates as my second team. And you were like, I need to do a podcast like what you're doing with Sox in the Basement, which is a White Sox show. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll talk Pirates baseball. And it's been fun for the last 5 years. And then it's kind of like my life got really busy, and you kind of took the reins, even though you kept my intro at the beginning, which is so weird, but I love it. And I want to record a new one for you, like right now, because I feel so bad that you're still using it. But I think that today, on the 5-year anniversary, I'd love to compare just a little bit, because I know that Pirates fans have a lot of angst over what's going on with their team. Man, I'm a White Sox fan primarily, and a Pirates fan secondly, and I've been following you guys all year, and I wish I could switch teams. Can I have the Pirates, please? I mean, if Pirates fans don't want the Pirates, I'll trade you the White Sox. Okay. If Pirates fans don't want Ben Cherington, I will gladly trade you Chris. I've never been the general manager of anything Gets, who was hired only because he was the last guy standing in the building after Jerry Reinsdorf fired all of his friends. And he just kind of convinced the old man, I think I can do it. Like, I want what you have. Like, I mean, like that's the thing. Like, I maybe I can give a little perspective today about like because I think when you're a fan of a team, Craig, you think that all the bad things are the worst for you. And I'm not saying they're not bad. Your owner is cheaper than mine, which I don't even think is possible. But my owner, Jerry Reinsdorf of the White Sox, is quoted by David Sampson, former executive of the Expos and the Marlins, who now has that podcast that he does. And he came on and confirmed it on one of my shows, quoted as saying it's better to come in second place. He doesn't want to win. He constantly threatens to move the team. He's like the evil owner that sits in the box in the natural, smoking his stogie in the dark and plotting against his own franchise. If he loses enough games, he pays less rent. Like, that's a real thing. And so I look at Nutting and I go, well, he's just cheap. I look at my guy and he's evil. So I look at Cherington and I go, okay, he hasn't done very well. But then I look at my guy and I go, well, he doesn't even know what he's doing. Right. And the people before him didn't know what they were like. I have some hope that Getz can figure it out because he surrounded himself with a lot of people from outside the organization. But I look at Cherington and go, God, if I could give him Jerry Reinsdorf's miserly, because it's miserly for a big market like Chicago, miserly payroll, it'd be so much more than the Pirates. He'd have the White Sox in the playoffs. And I look at a 500 record and I say, come on, this is what you and I both said was going to happen in the first half of the year. I said 500 at the midway point is a blessing because all this young pitching and all of this team has to come together. They're going to be a second half team. They're a game and a half out of the playoffs, my friend, and they're 500 at the All-Star break. Let's not get greedy. Let's look in the positive way. That's at least how I feel about the Pittsburgh Pirates.
It definitely can be looked at that way, Chris. I mean, I know that the offense has been one of the worst in baseball. I mean, they are down in the offensive rankings with the likes of the White Sox. I mean, even since Nick Gonzalez came up. Yeah, Nick came up and got hot in the beginning with Brian Reynolds, monster June and July, with Rowdy Tellez finally coming on. I mean, even during that time frame, you have to look at the smallest of sample size to even get us in the top half, offensively. So that's where a lot of the Pirates fan struggles come from. And we did talk about, being in this position and having, some reinforcements coming. We didn't know when Paul Skeens was going to come up. We didn't know, when Nick Gonzalez was going to come up and if he was going to perform well. We know that, Brian Reynolds and Andrew McCutchen and all those guys are, historically slow starters. And usually it takes them till June about to get going. I think that's kind of where my fear is as a Pirates fan, is the pitching is still there. The pitching has depth, even with injuries to Jared Jones and Bailey Falter, because of what they've done with Luis Ortiz this year, having him be the long man and then building him back up to being a starter. Before Falter was injured, Martin Perez when he's been good, but you've pretty much had, Skeen since he came up, Keller except for a couple starts, Jones before he got injured, Falter before he got injured. But I think that's where Pirates fans are kind of worrying here. And before we hopped on, I was talking about the schedule that we have, till the end of July here, is that we come out of the All-Star break, we play the Phillies, who are hot as anything. We play St. Louis, who has had our number. We play the Diamondbacks, who have suffered some injuries on their pitching side, but, went to the World Series last year. And then we play the Houston Astros, who were playing terribly, but are now, have themselves back in the race as well. So I think that's where Pirates fans are like, okay, we're 48-48 and we're going to lose 10 straight coming out of here. And that's where I think that the fear comes from, because we're Pirates fans.
Well, you do have a terrible offense. I mean, if I try to find the positives in your offense, be positive about the fact that Nick Gonzalez and O'Neill Cruz are at least average to above average compared to the rest of the league in terms of their OPS, and they're young and they'll improve. So it's nice to see that up the middle, right? I mean, it's nice to see that from them. Brian Reynolds has been performing this year. And Joey Bart was what a surprise, right? I mean, he's positive. I'm looking at the break.
Cool acquisition. Yeah.
He's got an 802 OPS at the break here. I mean, it's still he wasn't playing the whole year for you, but what a nice little acquisition that really worked out. I mean, that's why, look, I don't know. I hate defending general managers because I always feel like I can do it better than them, all of them. Okay. I mean, I think sometimes they get wrapped up in their prospects. They get wrapped up in guys they believed in, and then they can't just look at the stats and be cold hearted and get rid of somebody. And so I think they all have their flaws and they all overvalue the wrong guys and they all have hard times pulling the trigger on things. But I mean, there have been some positives that were unexpected. Like, I didn't know if Nick Gonzalez was going to come up and be able to be a positive player at the plate in the field. But so far from what I could see, I see that. I mean, I didn't know how they were going to figure out catcher this year. And it didn't work out the way they wanted to, but they have a capable catcher back there. I wish O'Neal Cruz was otherworldly at the plate, but I'm not going to call him a complete disappointment. The disappointment is when you look at how Ke'Bryan Hayes performs at the plate. Okay. I think everybody got really excited during the shortened season and they all thought that was real. I think we warned that it probably wasn't. And I would have liked it to at least been league average. I would like to see him like not be a below average hitter, but that's what he is. He's a below average hitter who makes up for some of it with his glove. Most comparable thing that I can give you is Yoan Moncada with the Chicago White Sox. It's the same guy. You have the same third baseman essentially out there. You got a really good defensive player that doesn't perform well at the plate, and from time to time will have an injury and be off the field.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing.
The two of them could stand next to each other. If we swap them right now, we get no difference. Is what we would do. The only difference is that the Pirates weren't stupid enough to pay him $25 million a year. And they're going to have to buy Moncada out in Chicago in the offseason for $5 million to prevent paying him an additional 25. So, I mean, the Pirates haven't screwed up as much. And again, I feel like at 500 with that kind of pitching, you could trade, the biggest mistake of the offseason continues to be the Aroldis Chapman signing. $10 million invested in the wrong place when you needed a bat. You can still make up for that right now and maybe find a bat dealing Chapman. I think you could still make up for that right now. I think you could still make a swap. Like, you could trade Chapman right now, I would imagine, for one of the more valuable things in all of Major League Baseball, and that is a young hitting prospect for a team that wants a Chapman in the postseason in their bullpen. The only problem is there's a ton of relief pitchers that are sitting out there. So you're really hoping it's somebody that just believes in him a little bit more because of his playoff experience and his pedigree. But if you can move that player to bring in that hitter, that would at least make it up, maybe if not for this year, for next year. And then go and trade one of your prospects. Like, it's almost like you got to look at it in two ways, right? Let's say you move Chapman to find a young hitter of the future. And then you trade one of your pitching prospects because you have plenty. And it doesn't need to be your top ones for a guy like Tommy Pham on the White Sox to come in and help in the field, right? There are other guys too. I just kind of go with him because I know he's available. But there's hitters that are floating around out there, right? Like, you can go and find some pieces to progress. I don't think this team needs to win a World Series for it to be a successful year. If they're over 500 and miss the playoffs, it was still a move into the positive if they go into the offseason and they add and they come in ready to go with a couple of free agent bats added into their team. Get excited. Get excited because they can win the division. Get excited because it's, you're not tearing it down here at the trade deadline. But you could also have a very successful season where you slip into that last playoff spot where you're only a game and a half out right now and be a couple games over 500. And maybe you catch lightning in a bottle and you have some exciting games, win a series in the playoffs. You're not built to win the whole thing. Although I did read a national guy recently who said if the Pirates make it into the postseason with this pitching staff, they're going to be really scary. And so I wouldn't give up on this. I wouldn't trade away a bunch of players. If you come close to 500 in this opening stretch out of the All-Star break and you're 2 under, I wouldn't be selling everything off. It's okay to shake some of these veterans that aren't doing anything more than a replacement level player. I'm fine with that. You've got some older players that have done nothing more than what a AAA player would be able to do on a team, that a replacement level player wouldn't be able to do. You want to move on from those guys, fine. You want to move Chapman and you think you can get something back for the future? I don't think you're shooting yourself in the foot for your run to still try to make the postseason. All right. You can make moves without giving up. My fear is if they trade a guy like Chapman, everybody goes, oh, they've given up. I don't think that's what you're doing there. You can remake your team in season, still be heading for one of those wild card spots, give it your best shot, continue to watch the development of your younger players and be ready to load for bear for a better season in 2025. And that would still be successful. I mean, as aggravating as the season has been for Pirates fans, you're still 500 at the very beginning of coming out of a rebuild. And this is how the process works. You don't lose 100 games a year for like 3 years and suddenly win the division. It doesn't flip that quickly.
Yeah, because I mean, we talk about the teams that, have done their rebuilds recently, and I looked at a bunch of teams. I mean, right now the Royals are in the 7th year of their rebuild and are finally, kind of starting to put things together. The Detroit Tigers are actually in like the 7th or 8th year of a rebuild, and like what's happening for them?
They're 3 games under 500 in 4th place, and the only reason that they're in 4th place is because the White Sox have been the first team to lose. Before this year, no team had lost 70 games before the All-Star break. They've lost 71. And the Tigers are only better than them in the American League Central. So that rebuild's not going well at all.
Are you a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates and supporting small businesses? If so, Bucks in the Basement has you covered. Introducing the Bucks in the Basement Vouch Store with products from places like Split Rock Coffee. Coffee with a purpose. Established, owned, and operated by disabled veterans, sworn to protect America. Or Camp Craft Cocktails. More than cocktails. It's a mission to build longer tables where everyone is welcome. We try and vouch for these products. Bucks in the Basement, proudly brought to you by Vouch. Visit our Vouch store at bucksinthebasement.com or simply click on the link in the show notes. I looked at last year's trade deadline, and it's not like a one-for-one example of like a Chapman and what you would want to get, but it would be looking at like when the Cleveland Guardians last year traded Aaron Savali for like a Kyle Manzardo, which hasn't really worked out for them in the short term right now, but he's still kind of like a prospect, and he was a guy that was blocked. He's still only, 23 years old. And it's something that can help for the future. And it could help, at the end of this season as well. If you need a bat, if you can get a guy that comes up that's hitting well in AAA, that's blocked on a good team, and that team's saying, you know what, we're one piece away. We just need a setup man in the bullpen. And we believe enough in Chapman. Like you said, the biggest thing for him is that the money that is going to have to be, because last year it was like $3 million or $3.25 million, and there wasn't that much left when he got traded to the Rangers for Cole Reagans. But I mean, this, like, giving him $10.5 million was just, it's something I still will never understand for a guy that has performed well at times with, David Bednar back on the IL. Surprise, surprise, David Bednar on the IL. But, he's a guy that is still, like, both by Fangraphs and by Baseball Reference WAR, is a below replacement level player. Like, he's below 0.0 WAR on the season. His whip is still sitting at like a 1.6. So, like, for Aroldis Chapman, I mean, if you can get something for him, you don't necessarily need to have that left-handed replacement right away. I know Ryan Borucki's coming back. And he performed well last year and could slide into that role. But more than anything, I mean, bullpen guys can step up. I mean, we saw Carmen Mlodzinski not be great and now be good. We've seen Kyle Nicholas not be great and now be good. We saw, Colin Holderman be otherworldly when he came up, and now he's starting to struggle. They're going to have those types of struggles. So Chapman isn't the lockdown bullpen guy that he's been previously. And even then he had his bumps and his warts, but those warts have gotten a little bit worse. But yeah, you could do both. And when I had the show last week where I had my non-relation JT Toth on from Draft Nation, we kind of talked about being buyers and sellers. I mean, there's ways to add to your team by, using your capital that you've grown in your prospects and that you can move them for an MLB player now, whether it be a rental or somebody that you would have controlled beyond this year.
Well, you
And
need to replace Jack Sawinski.
Yeah.
Like you need another outfielder to add into the mix that's playing every day. That's the glaring thing right now. Okay, he's 26 years old. It ain't happening. All right, for all the excitement, he doesn't belong as a starter or a guy that's getting very much playing time at all on a contending team in Major League Baseball. He just isn't it. I would be moving on from him. That would be my number one goal to add to this team, would be to find a hitter that can stand out there in center field, or worst case, you move Reynolds to center and you put the guy in the corner. But you need to find that. That's something they should be looking for at the deadline if it becomes available, and they should be willing to move prospect capital for, because I don't think they have anything down in the minor leagues that makes me believe they can fix this internally. So they're either going to have to fix it in the offseason or they can fix it now. So they have to decide for themselves, do we want to do a temporary fix now for this run and then really address it in the offseason, or is a deal going to come along right now that you can make a move? Like, I know there's outfielders out there that everybody's all coveting, right? But Luis Robert Jr. is going to cost a ridiculous amount that you probably don't have in your system, because the White Sox are pitcher heavy, like most teams in Major League Baseball. I mean, this is an unfortunate trend in Major League Baseball. Most teams who are doing well with high-end prospects in their minor league system are pitching heavy right now. Good hitting prospects are like a unicorn in Major League Baseball. They are hard to find, and teams don't want to move on from them. That is the current trend in MLB. And so you have to have one of those, at least one, if not two, to give up to go get a guy that you would have under control for 3 more years at below market value, that would patrol the outfield, be a Gold Glover, and has the ability to be 5-6 WAR player and hit third in the middle of your lineup. Like, you add him if you added him onto the Pirates roster right now, he's batting in the 2 or 3 spot on your team. Okay, maybe 4, but probably 2 or 3, and he is the frightening player sitting in the middle of the order, and he's your best outfielder immediately. And so you got to pay for that, and I don't think the Pirates have it. There's other outfielders that are out there. You can get low level, like a Pham or a Taylor Ward out west, or you can even look at maybe a Jazz Chisholm, although I don't think I would give very much up for him, and I think he's going to be overvalued. And unfortunately, Cody Bellinger, who can play center field, is dealing with an injury right now at the Cubs, and I don't think they're going to trade him in division. But then again, they are giving up if they trade him, and if they are giving up, then they're just going to want prospects. So do you want to watch one of your prospects come up in a couple of years and play against you? So that's the problem. The problem is finding the fit, but you can easily identify the problem, right? If you could just add in a professional hitter that would suddenly replace if you could suddenly replace Sawinski with a guy that hits in the top half of your order and plays center field, you flip what the team is. You add wins above this 500. And you are probably a playoff team. So the question is, can you find something that gives you at least enough of a boost for this year that's temporary? Do you value what you can get at the trade deadline, which probably isn't as much as what you can get in the offseason, enough to make a trade and deal a prospect? That is the real question, I think, sitting in front of Ben Cherington right now. It is not who's going to fill in as the closer if you trade away Chapman. You can find guys will step up all the time. Okay. I mean, people always say, like, Chris, why do you never like relief pitchers? I'll go back to my roots here, my origin, the pennant behind me for the 2005 World Series. They had 3 closers that year. They had Shingo Takatsu, who fell apart and got injured. They had Dustin Hermanson, whose back held out, and they brought up a minor league pitcher from Double-A in the name of Bobby Jenks, who out of nowhere just found some magic, right? So, I mean, like, I wouldn't be afraid of that. I don't think that that's as hard of a move to make if you're in the situation the Pirates are in right now. It's finding the outfielder that can be a hitter that boosts your lineup. If you can find that right now, you can get that at a low-level replacement just to finish the season, and then you have to address it in the offseason. It's your number one goal. or you see if you can address it right now, kind of long term, but you got to pay.
Yeah, and you mentioned the two things, Chris, that I think kind of are the reason why the team is 48-48 now, and not maybe like not having like 52 or 53 wins and be like, right up there with the Cardinals, which is because Ke'Bryan Hayes last year was out for a month, came back healthy, and set the world on fire. And this year, after the first few weeks, just hasn't been healthy. And a guy that has a 74 OPS plus and not putting up as many defensive runs saved as he had in previous years because he's had a back issue like the entire season. That's the one thing. And then Jack Suwinski, I mean, with a 63 OPS plus, when last year he was, a positive above 100 OPS.
Yeah, but he was close.
Great.
He was close to not even being a positive. That average just basically sits at 200. And I remember we warned that, like, he can either take the next step or this may be all he is. This could be it. And that ain't going to be good enough. And that now you're seeing the bad side of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because if he was even like just even a little bit better, I think you would still be looking for that replacement. But I think a lot of people were looking for him to take a step forward this year. And we were basically saying, we think that last year it was the best Jack Suwinski that you were going to get. I mean, that's just the way it was. And he's unfortunately taken that step back. Michael A. Taylor signing, which we liked because of the defense. I mean, he's just been, 53 OPS plus. Your boy, Yasmani Grandal, who's
I warned you about
him.
Now. I told you about him. I told you what he was.
Yeah, a 41 OPS plus and is playing terrible defense. So, I mean, that's where Joey...
Call me next time you want to sign a former White Sox player. I'll tell you what they really are. Oh, my goodness. Don't you have scouts? I mean, I know the South Side is dangerous, but I mean, send somebody to go watch a game.
Yeah, but that's where like kind of a lot of the stuff is falling apart is just the, how poorly they performed. I mean, obviously how bad Rowdy was for the first 2 months, but I mean, even with him playing well, they're still playing around like a 500 baseball team. Like you're talking about, Chris, you have Brian Reynolds in the outfield, and then you have nobody else because Connor Joe took the step back like we said he would, that he's going to end up being pretty much right around like an average baseball player. He's got a 104 OPS plus and has been struggling for the past, month and a half because that's the type of player he is. He's like right around an average player that you want to have as your like fourth outfielder and backup first baseman. What about
this kid that got out there right now? Palacios, is that how you say it?
Joshua Palacios. Palacios.
I mean, he's hot. He's hot since he got up here.
And that's what he did last year as well. I mean, last year he had about 10 home runs. 3 of them were like game-changing home runs where he would hit a 3-run home run to either win us the game or put us up. He's a spark plug and he's a good player. But as the season wears on and as he gets more plate appearances, he ends up being probably around between a 75 to maybe 90 topping out OPS plus.
Right. So you have one starting outfielder in Brian Reynolds and a bunch of fourth outfilders and AAA players to fill out the rest. Is that what you're basically saying? Okay. So that is a failure, first of all, from a front office that did not put the money where it should have been and instead gave it to Aroldis Chapman. That's the only thing that they really can fix again. Like I said, you can fix that by trying to look for the future, by trading Chapman for a player that may eventually slide in or at least help you there or at another position, but you want to find a bat. Okay. And then you have to go out and you're going to have to use some of the capital you have, which is something they always should have been aware that they were going to have to use because of the way that they have to spend because of Bob Nutting. And they're going to have to use some of that capital to go out and get themselves an outfielder, maybe 2 outfielders. I mean, like, you're going to have to find, this is the biggest problem with the Pirates for the off season this year. It's a problem now, and it is the number one thing that they have to address is who's going to stand out in the outfield. Because if they can't address it, doesn't matter what else they do. It doesn't matter who the pitchers are. It doesn't matter. They have to find professional hitters that can stand in the outfield.
And that takes
which is crazy to me because they're all over Major League Baseball, but they don't have them.
And it takes me back to like before the season started when we listed, like we did think they still needed starting pitching. The starting pitching is overperformed what anybody thought they would be. But we said like in order, we needed an outfielder, a catcher, and a second baseman. I mean, luckily to this point, Nick Gonzalez has stepped up, but is now dropped back down to about a league average bat and could be below that fairly quickly if he goes into a little bit of a slump. But yeah, I mean, we basically said you need an outfielder at least, you need a catcher, and you need a second baseman. And that's where the biggest holes ended up being this year. Luckily, Joey Bart's playing well right now, but you don't know what he's going to turn into. Nick Gonzalez, you don't know what he's going to be. But yeah, man, that outfield has just been – it's been a black hole. And if Connor Joe didn't get off to the ridiculously hot start that he did, but he was playing mostly first base because
they weren't using him. They weren't using him in the outfield. When he was red hot, when he was out there, I don't know. I mean, again, this is something every team goes through. Every team finds guys they brought up that they believe in, that they think are going to make the next step, and they hang with them sometimes longer than they should. At this point, there has to be the sobering reality that you are very, very thin in the outfield. And next year, there's a couple of outfielders that are going to be out there, right? Like Alex Verdugo will be out there. Cody Bellinger probably opts out. You're not getting Juan Soto because your guy's not paying for him, right? Okay, Michael Conforto will be floating out there. Joey Gallo, Jock Peterson, Anthony Santander is probably the most value type outfielder. You could put him in the corner. He's going to have probably an 800 OPS and sit in the middle of your lineup. He'll be one of those free agents that is kind of far down the list that you want to sign early before other teams are looking at him. But I mean, like there's names out there right now. It's a question of, do you want to grab, and I'm just going to give the examples off of the White Sox roster because I know what's available. Do you want to overpay for Luis Robert Jr. because they're not going to move him unless you completely blow their socks off and basically rebuild their franchise with the move? That's how they value him, whether you agree with it or not. That's how they value him. They're not, because they don't need to trade him. They can trade him in the offseason, they can trade him at the midseason next year, and they're going to get the same value. So they can wait for the perfect trade. They are not on a clock. It's the same thing with Garrett Crochet. They have these two guys everybody keeps talking about, signed for multiple years. They're not going to move unless you overpower them. So do the Pirates want to go and overpower for a player like that? Or do they want to go knock on the door of a guy that also is being shopped by the White Sox and Tommy Pham? Or a Gavin Sheets, left-handed power bat, stands in right field. Like I just look at the team that I live with, and I look at the Pirates and I go, wow, I don't know. I mean, imagine if you added Gavin Sheets and or Andrew Vaughn, and beefed up your first base, your outfield, you got a Tommy Pham veteran out there. I mean, it might sound like I'm giving away garbage here, but all three of those guys have league average or better OPSs.
Yeah.
So all three of them would be an improvement on your lineup. And they don't cost anything. Pham's done at the end of the year, and the other two guys are still in their arbitration years. So, it wouldn't cost you a lot. And I don't think the Sox are going to, a team like the White Sox would be like, we're just trying to get new blood in here. You might have the prospects for a move like that, and then you go out and you compete this year and you regroup in the offseason. They may be willing to do something like that. They may be willing to look at one of those guys. And there are guys like that on most teams right now that are selling. So you can fill in, like I said, and you can make a push here just for that last wild card spot. And at least keep yourself open to the idea that if the right thing comes along long term, do you have the pieces and are you willing to move them to fix the problem? Because otherwise, you got to fix it in the offseason and free agency. Yeah. With Bob Nutting's wallet. Good luck with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And before we jumped on here, Chris, we basically we equated to the Luis Robert situation to what we had with Brian Reynolds, not so long ago, which teams were coming back and saying that the Pirates were asking for the world. Well, they were asking for the world because they didn't have to move him. The White Sox, yes, they have a absolutely terrible record,
right?
But what's going to be the difference if they move him now or they move him in the offseason? I think they still get a very similar return.
He may be more valuable. I mean, because you may get teams that now are involved in the move who are going to make massive changes across their roster in the offseason that aren't willing to do that now because they're in the middle of a pennant chase.